Excellent. Well, hello everyone and welcome. Very excited to be here with you all and to also be having this wonderful fireside-ish chat, if we had a fire here, with Helen Papagiannis, who is the pioneer augmented reality expert, to talk about how AR is going to propel the next phase of education. So Helen, AR and VR, so augmented reality and virtual reality, tend to be mixed up quite a bit. Can you provide some more detail on what are the differences between the two?
Yeah, absolutely. So with virtual reality, you're completely immersed in a computer-generated environment. So in the image on the left here, we see this person has placed their body in a VR contraption called Birdly. And by flapping his arms, he thereby flaps his wings, and he's flying high above the streets of Manhattan. So he goes somewhere else entirely. Reality is completely blocked out. In the other examples with augmented reality, we're still rooted in the real world, but now we have digital content that supplements our experience. So that can take the form of 3D models and audio and text and things like this. So what's important to remember is with VR, you go someplace else, you leave reality behind, and with AR, you're still grounded in reality, but we now have digital content that enhances the real world. And when we're looking at augmented reality, especially when it comes to higher education, it's really important that we look at how augmented reality can enhance human abilities and enhance human capabilities rather than supplanting the real world or supplanting our imaginations.
All about the human experience. Well, it sounds simple enough. So I think we have perhaps a bit of a game to test out our skills in this.
Yes, so we're gonna play a little game together. It's a game I launched back in 2018. We play it weekly on Instagram. It's called Real or AR. The way it works is I'm going to show you an image. You're gonna take a really close look, and then you're gonna guess if it's real or AR. And we're gonna do this just with a simple show of hands, all right? Let's take a look at the first one. Take a good look at the stormtrooper. Do you think the stormtrooper is real or augmented reality? How many of you think it is real? A show of hands. Okay, and how many of you think it's augmented reality? Also a show of hands. Okay, I think that was about 50-50. What do you think?
Yeah.
What do you think? Actually, you know the answer.
I know.
I'm not gonna ask you, never mind.
I also don't think I got the answer correct the first time, so.
This stormtrooper is AR. So this is an example of Google's AR stickers, and it enables you to put a 3D character in your environment. So when it comes to higher education, we can imagine how we can have a 3D character that is perhaps a historical figure and have them in your space telling you their story in their words. Now, if you want to know the giveaway, if you look really closely, you can see a reflection of the boy, but no reflection of the stormtrooper. How about this hamburger? Is this hamburger real or AR? How many of you think it is real? A show of hands. Now you're just kind of not sure, right? Okay, and how many of you think it is AR? A show of hands. So it looks like maybe that one was real. What do you think? Mm-hmm. So this hamburger actually has 0 calories because it is also augmented reality. So aside from food, we can use augmented reality to see a concept that might be difficult to grasp and have a shared understanding of what that is and explore it in 360. Okay, how about this one? Take a good look at this sculpture. Is this sculpture real or AR? How many of you think the sculpture is real? A show of hands. Okay, and how many of you think it is AR? Show of hands. Okay, so this one seems like it is AR, and it is in fact AR. So this is an example from the Met Museum. Now, at the height of the pandemic, many cultural institutions had closed their doors, and this is an example where the Met Museum made items from their collection available in your home to view and explore in 360. So imagine being able to explore objects and artifacts that might not otherwise be accessible and have that in your home. Okay, last one. How about this image? Is this image real or AR? How many of you think this is real? A show of hands. And how many of you think it is AR? Show of hands. I think that one's 50-50, and the rest of you are just probably very confused by this point, right? This one is the only one that is real. So it's a mind-bending installation at the Pantheon in Rome. So as you can see, the line between the virtual and real is very quickly blurring. And augmented reality is starting to get really, really good with high-fidelity graphics to the point where we are having some trouble even distinguishing between what is real or real. So if you want to keep testing that virtual muscle, you can play along with me on Instagram.
Well, again, I don't know about you all, but it definitely left me confused, questioning what is real and what is not real. So with that, in your book, Augmented Human, you talk about how AR is a new form and mode of communication and how that's actually revolutionizing the way that we communicate across the world in new ways. What does AR do really well?
Yeah, so in Augmented Human, I talk about the three things that AR does very well. And they are visualization, annotation, and storytelling. And these also really apply to higher education. So when we look at visualization with AR allows us to bring concepts into the real world that might otherwise be imagined or difficult to grasp, and to have a common shared understanding of that object. This is an example from Magic Leap and the Dan Marino Foundation, where they have enabled people who have autism to be able to practice for job interviews. So this enables them to see a virtual human and to build competency and confidence, as well as to relieve anxiety. When it comes to annotation, it's a step beyond visualization, where we now have step-by-step guided instructions as to how to perform a task. And in this example, it uses the Microsoft HoloLens, which is an augmented reality headset, and it's called Microsoft Dynamics 365. And it enables you to see step-by-step instructions shared with a live expert in real time. So your view is transmitted to somebody else who is remote, and in real time, they can annotate with things like circles and arrows exactly on top of what you're looking at to help you complete a task. And when we think of higher education, this can really enhance one-to-one learning and be able to access experts that may not be available physically in your location. And the third thing AR does really well is storytelling. So AR is a new medium, and it allows us to tell stories and remember stories in ways not possible prior. This is an example at a UNESCO World Heritage Site in South Korea, where you have this wonderful, lovely character that is your tour guide and takes you through the physical site, where you can see traditional dance and costumes and really learn about the culture. And one of the things Christy and I have always talked about is how AR should really enhance the human experience, how it should leave the world a better place even. And so it's not about leaving reality behind, but having a stronger connection to the people, places, and things in the real world.
Absolutely. And I love that element of storytelling and being able to continue our past into the future and what that looks like. And it still amazes me just reflecting on this right now, some of my past work in museums in my earlier career where it was very disjointed, but I remember the awe that kids would have at being able to interact with history in these new ways, and to see it, in this format is truly, truly inspirational. So in one of your articles for the World Economic Forum, you talk a lot about how the pandemic has fast-forwarded all things virtual, including AR. What are some of the uses that you've seen in higher education, and what do we see today in higher ed?
Yeah, so there are two examples that stand out, both in VR and AR. And the first example that you see on the screen is from one of my colleagues at the World Economic Forum, Jeremy Bailenson, and he teaches a course in VR. So at Stanford, he teaches a course called Virtual People. And he takes his students on 15-minute field trips in VR. And one of the things that I really love about when he's assessing how to use VR in a higher education experience, he has an acronym called DICE. So it stands for Dangerous, Impossible, Counterproductive, and Expensive. So for instance, journeying to the middle of the ocean might be impossible or dangerous, and perhaps traveling to museums or different cities around the world might be too expensive. So that's a really exciting course at Stanford. And then also in the US at Case Western Reserve University, this is an AR example. So all first-year students at Case Western during the height of the pandemic, when the university closed their doors, were given the Microsoft HoloLens, which is an AR headset, and using an award-winning app developed with Cleveland Clinic called HoloAnatomy, they were able to study the human body. So there was no need to be on site at a cadaver lab, and they were able to really get into like the most minute details of the human body and be able to learn in ways that were not possible in reality.
It's truly amazing to see what is possible, and I think, again, that's bringing things alive into the present moment. And I do think it is important. It's actually kind of still surreal that we're all here in person at a conference. I think here in the UK, it was 2 years ago that everything went officially under lockdown. So it really highlights the importance of how we are able to connect in ways that we wouldn't be able to possible. And, under the ocean or otherwise. But I do think, this has highlighted the importance of being able to truly connect in those ways that sometimes we can lose sight of. So with that, in your book, again, Augmented Human, you talk a lot also about how AR is shifting and beginning to shift into more of these multi-user experiences. So we've talked a lot about sort of the individual experience and how we interact, but what does that look like from a multi-user experience?
Absolutely. So for the most part, AR up until today really has been a single user experience. So for it to truly be a mass communication medium, it has to be multi-user and two-way. And what we're starting to see more of are connected experiences. And this is an example from Snapchat. So the examples that I've shared prior have been primarily on headsets, but this is just using a smartphone, an ordinary device, and being able to be connected across distance with somebody through the app. So the example that we see on screen here is a game from Lego, but you can imagine this being a homework assignment perhaps, or a project where people can come together and be able to work collaboratively across distance. Now with this example, it uses augmented reality that is persistent. So what that means is if you have, let's say, a 3D human model and you place it in a space, when you return, it will still be there. So this enables people across distance to collaborate, come together, design experiences without necessarily being in the same physical place together. So we're starting to see a lot more of that, and like the remote expert example I had shared earlier, it's really about how can we use this technology to come together, to enhance connection, to work together in new ways that were not otherwise possible in reality.
I absolutely love that, and it reminds me, so for those of you that do not know, I've been with Zoom now for over 7 years and actually launched our education vertical, but education has always been a key pillar for Zoom. And Eric Yuan, our CEO and founder, he actually came up with the idea for a very video-centric platform because he wanted to be able to see his wife in university who is a long distance away. And he just has this video that's talking about, if I could just see her, if I could just give her a hug, I think that would be great. And that was the driving force behind creating Zoom. We had no idea, obviously, what would happen, really. But it was truly about that human connection and being able to have as close as possible when you couldn't be physically present together. Now again, not meant to replace the physical in-person connection, but really being that way to connect in those ways when it isn't possible. Now that kind of brings me to the future. And when we think about augmented reality, we think about AR, we think about it a lot in the visual context and using our sight and our vision sense. We have many more senses than just sight. I would love to hear some of the examples that you have using AR with other senses.
Yeah, you bet. So for the most part, again, AR has been primarily visual. All of the examples that you've seen so far today from us have been visual, but it is possible to engage with all of our senses. So in Augmented Human, there's a chapter dedicated to each of the senses, and so on the screen here you see, of course, vision, hearing, and then we get into some bit more bizarre senses to replicate digitally, like smell and taste. Should we pause?
Can Chloe Maxwell please head over to the North Swan Organisers Office to collect
have touch. Touch is also possible with augmented reality. And the thing to consider too is that not everyone is a visual learner. I know I am a tactile learner, and touch is one of the senses that I want to focus on next. I will actually highlight, if you're really curious, because they look like very odd slides on the stage right now, the smell and taste examples. If you're curious about these, the way that they work is the smell example, there is a smell device around the neck, and it is tied to a GPS location. So that's a historical recreation project using scent. So when you're on site and you're at the exact location, the GPS triggers a specific scent that is wafted to your nose. We've seen visual historical recreation projects like the example I shared with you in South Korea, but smell is quite unique. And then the other example that has a very curious head-mounted display, that's from researchers in Japan. It's called Metacookie. And in that example, smell and taste come together. So you're able to choose the flavor of a virtual cookie. The cookie transforms before your eyes, and then the scent, the corresponding scent, is wafted to your nose. So again, a little bit more out there in the future, but coming. And so when we think about touch, this is an example. Back in 2011, I visited the Magic Vision Lab in Adelaide, Australia, and I had this example of a haptics demo. So haptics just means touch simulation. And wearing a pair of glasses, I was able to see a virtual fish in front of me, and using a special tool called the Phantom Stylus, I was able to reach out and touch the individual scales of that fish. And you can imagine that this was completely mind-bending, because touch tends to substantiate that something exists. So here I was seeing something that was virtual, and not only seeing it, but being able to touch it. And fast forward to 2022, you don't actually need a tool like the Phantom Stylus. All you need is your hands. So we're seeing this technology is improved drastically with tools like ultrasound. So being able to just reach out and feel the vibrations on your hand. And again, if we think about tactile learning and things like building muscle memory by being able to exercise a specific action and remember through that. And the last example that I want to share with you is in terms of accessibility. So not everyone is sighted, and how can we have augmented reality experiences that are also accessible? This is a really wonderful example of using touch with augmented reality and virtual reality in a museum setting to help people who are blind experience the artwork. Let's have a look at this video.
It was very new to me when I tried first time. This was like a different world. I was thinking, well, how can I feel in these gloves? How the hell am I supposed to feel something now? And then the vibrations came, and it was something I totally didn't expect. Well, art is not always explainable just by words. The element to touch it and to know, to feel it is like missing. When first touching the virtual statue, I was kind of puzzled, like it actually works, and that that there's something in front of me that is existing. Usually when you come to a museum, you can't touch these things, so I can just hear about it from a guide or from somebody who's with me, reading that, or then that's not a full experience. Shouldn't be. But the best moment was, of course, when I started to have an idea what part of the body I'm touching, and have the art in front of you and can explore it and see how much your imaginations were right, what you wouldn't expect. For example, about David. Like, yeah, I knew that this guy will have a big head, but that it's this big. Or
I recognized the dress of Venus of Milo. I said, like, this is the dress, and they said, yes, all right. So it was the greatest.
The entire experience, and this is something that adds this element which is missing, which was missing before. That you can see it really and know know the beauty of the art and touch it.
such a powerful, powerful demonstration and video of the impact that this technology can have in truly enhancing the human experience. I know I just had to pause so I didn't tear up again. But I think that this is truly an example of when we think about creating equity in the learning environment, we think about inclusivity, really how we can open up our ways of creating those environments to really support all of our learners, but also challenge us to utilize our senses, our capabilities in new ways, and the impact that that can make into education. You know, we talk about the title of how AR can propel the next phase of education. I think a lot of, you know, what we've done in the past has been sort of checking a checkbox, and we've appealed towards, you know, a certain audience, but not to everyone. So we've been leaving so many amazing individuals behind, and now we have this opportunity to truly come together and ground in these new ways, learn new ways of sensing the world, of seeing the world, of feeling the world. I love the example of taste and smell and what that can do. And I do think, again, this is really impactful, and I hope that this was inspirational for you all in how we structure those environments going forward, that it's not just so much of teaching to a book on a page or teaching to, you know, statistics or pieces of information, but really how we enhance that experience. And what does that experience feel like? What does that experience sound like? What does the past coming alive feel like? What does the future coming forward to us now feel like? So I want to say thank you again, Helen, for sharing your insights, your expertise on this topic. I know we've been on a wild ride, and we're here, and I can only imagine the possibilities that we have ahead of us. Thank you all for joining us here today. I'm wishing you all a wonderful Bett and Ahead show, and thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.